They thought he was nothing but a beggar, yet destiny was preparing him to return as the one they could never forget. Every insult pushed him deeper into despair. But what no one knew was that the man they mocked would rise to change their lives forever. Welcome to African Tales by Sanan, where every story carries the heartbeat of Africa. You're watching right now from somewhere special. Tell us in the comments where and when you're tuning in, because your presence is part of our journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another emotional and suspenseful tale. He entered the village as a beggar, but left as its greatest benefactor. The midday sun burned over the land as the dust rose from the lonely road that led into Ndalama, a small African village known for its maize fields and its people's sharp tongues. On that hot afternoon, a thin figure appeared at the edge of the settlement, his clothes torn, his sandals broken, his face tired and hungry. His name was Cato, though no one in the village knew or cared. To them, he looked like nothing more than a beggar. A man with nothing in his hands, no family beside him, no dignity left. Yet he was not entirely alone. On his shoulder perched a parrot, its gray feathers shining faintly under the blazing sun, its red tail flicking with restless energy. The bird's name was Moyo, and while most parrots simply mimicked sounds for amusement, Moyo carried an unusual gift: a mind that saw, a tongue that scolded, and a heart that never let Cato walk in silence. The villagers first noticed the stranger when Mama Thandi, an old woman roasting maize by the road, shaded her eyes with her wrinkled hand. "Look there," she muttered, her voice filled with disdain. "Another wanderer, another hungry man come to eat what is not his." Soon others turned their heads. Farmers, resting from the heat, leaned on their hoes and laughed. Children abandoned their play and ran closer, pointing at the beggar's worn-out trousers, his ragged shirt, his cracked feet. But most of all, they pointed at the bird on his shoulder. "A beggar and his parrot," one boy shouted, and the others echoed in laughter. "Maybe the bird will beg for him when his voice grows weak." Cato lowered his head. He had walked too long to fight with words. His stomach ached, his throat was dry, but he whispered softly to his companion, "Be calm. Moyo, let them laugh. We have faced worse." But Moyo was not silent. The parrot flapped his wings, tilted his head toward the crowd, and in a clear voice that sounded almost like a man's, cried, "Shame! Shame on you! You laugh at a hungry man? Shame!" The crowd gasped, then erupted in louder laughter. "The parrot speaks!" shouted Juma, a young farmer with thick arms and a cruel smile. "This beggar must be cursed. Only a cursed man travels with a talking bird." Another woman sneered. "Perhaps the parrot is his spirit. Perhaps the bird begs for him while he sleeps." Children clapped their hands and circled Cato, chanting, "Beggar, beggar! With a bird your story is too absurd." Cato moved slowly, trying to pass through, but the villagers followed, hurling insults like stones. "Go back where you came from. We have no food for the likes of you. Useless man, carrying a noisy bird instead of working like the rest of us." His silence, his refusal to argue back, only fed their cruelty. Once more, Moyo opened his beak and shouted, "Who is the beggar? The man without kindness. Who is poor? The man without mercy." Phones appeared in the hands of the young men and women. They recorded, laughing as the bird scolded them. "This will be good to share," one whispered. "Let the world see the fool with his parrot of wisdom." They thought it comedy, nothing more than a tale to laugh at over supper. But the words captured by those small devices would travel farther than they imagined, far beyond the dusty streets of Ndalama. Cato continued through the market. His eyes searched for food, his fingers clutched the last of his coins. At the small shop owned by Mr. Baraka, he placed the coins on the wooden counter. "Bread, please, if you will. Just enough for one meal." Baraka glanced at the coins and smirked. "This? Not even enough for the bread my goats eat." He reached behind the counter, picked up a stale, hard piece of bread, and threw it onto the ground. "Eat it from the dirt, beggar. That is where your kind belongs." The crowd roared again. Some laughed until tears streamed down their cheeks. Others bent to record with their phones, eager to capture the humiliation. Cato bent slowly, his hands trembling, ready to pick up the bread, but Moyo flapped his wings fiercely and squawked, "Bread belongs in hands, not in dirt. Cruelty is poverty. Mercy is wealth." For a moment the laughter weakened. A few villagers shifted uncomfortably. The parrot's voice cut through their pride like a knife. But Baraka only sneered louder. "What will you do, beggar? Will you feed your bird before you feed yourself?" Cato picked up the bread, brushed off the dust, and ate silently. His dignity stayed intact, though the villagers saw only weakness. His silence made them think he was powerless, but inside him a seed of patience was being sown. As the day dragged on, the insults did not stop. A group of children followed him, singing mocking songs. "Beggar, beggar, dusty feet, nothing to drink, nothing to eat." When he tried to drink from the well, Mama Zawadi shouted, "That water is for villagers, not for strays like you." When he asked Baba Musa for a place to sleep, the old man slammed his door. "Stay with the goats. Even they are cleaner than you." Every rejection weighed on him, yet he endured. Night fell, and Cato lay on the ground outside the village. The stars stretched wide above him, and the air grew cold. He shivered, pulling his thin shirt closer. Beside him, Moyo nestled against his chest, feathers warm against his skin. For a while they listened to the distant laughter from the huts, the voices of those who had mocked them all day. Moyo spoke softly, his voice calmer than during the day, as though the night gave him wisdom. They laugh now, but their laughter is short-lived. They record to mock, but the world will see truth. You suffer, Cato, but suffering can be the road to greatness. Cato closed his eyes, tears slipping silently down his face. "Do you truly believe so, Moyo? Do you believe a man like me can rise? A man mocked as a beggar, shamed before children? Can I ever be more?" "Yes," the parrot whispered, "because wealth is not only coins. Wealth is endurance. Wealth is patience. Wealth is mercy. One day the world will see, and one day you will be not only a millionaire, not only a billionaire, but a benefactor who turns shame into strength." Cato stroked Moyo's feathers gently. A small smile touched his lips. "Then let us endure. One more day, one more insult, one more test. Let us endure together." The next morning, as the market came alive, the first of the recorded videos began to spread. In nearby towns, people laughed at the clips of a dusty beggar with his talking parrot. "Look at this man," some chuckled. "He walks with a bird that scolds others like an elder." But others did not laugh. They watched closely, and they saw something different. This man is mocked, yet he does not strike back. He does not curse. He endures with dignity. This parrot speaks wisdom. The villagers may laugh, but the bird exposes their cruelty. Who is this man? Who is this bird? In the capital city, the videos reach students at universities, workers in offices, traders in markets. Within days, the name of Cato spread like fire. People called him the beggar with the wise parrot. Social media users created hashtags, beggar and parrot, for wisdom from dust, or life-changing story. What had been meant to humiliate became the seed of fame. But back in Nalama, the villagers still laughed each time they saw him. They did not know that their laughter was feeding the very thing they wanted to crush. They mocked, recorded, and shared, and in doing so, they lifted him higher. Cato, hungry and weary, did not yet see the full picture. He only knew one thing: the world was beginning to watch. And when the world watches, even a beggar can rise to become a billionaire. That night, as he sat again under the stars with Moyo resting quietly, Cato whispered, "Perhaps you are right, my friend. Perhaps humiliation is only the beginning. Perhaps this suffering is the path to something greater. If the world sees me as a fool today, let it be. One day they will see me as more. One day I will return here not with empty hands, but with gifts. One day they will remember that they mocked a beggar, and that beggar became their greatest benefactor." Moyo fluttered his wings softly and replied, "Yes, Cato, endure, for tomorrow begins a tale the world will never forget." The next morning began with the same heat, the same dust rising from the ground, and the same hunger gnawing inside Cato's stomach. He rose slowly from the patch of earth where he had slept, stretched his aching back, and touched the parrot perched faithfully on his shoulder. Moyo blinked and tilted his head, as if asking silently if they were ready for another day. Cato gave a faint smile and whispered, "One more day, my friend. Let us face what must be faced." They stepped into the village marketplace, where the smell of roasted maize and dried fish filled the air. The villagers spotted him quickly, and whispers turned to laughter. "There he is again, the beggar with his noisy parrot." A group of boys ran forward, blocking his path. One of them, the boldest, shouted, "Beggar, dance for us. Dance like a monkey. Maybe we'll give you food if you make us laugh." The others clapped their hands and laughed loudly. Cato shook his head gently. "I am not here to dance, children. I'm only here to live in peace." But Moyo stretched his wings and snapped, "Children who mock the hungry are poorer than beggars." The boys gasped, then erupted in laughter even louder than before. "Did you hear that? The parrot says we are poorer than beggars." They repeated the line as if it were a comedy act. Phones were lifted, the incident recorded, and the humiliation captured. As Cato walked on, he passed a woman named Mama Zawadi carrying a pot of water. She stepped aside dramatically, pulling her skirt away from him. "Don't come near me, beggar. You carry dust and shame. If your shadow touches my pot, the water will be cursed." Others laughed at her words, clapping their hands at her performance. Cato said nothing, his eyes fixed on the ground, but Moyo's voice cut through the laughter. "Cursed is the heart that despises mercy. Clean water cannot wash a cruel soul." The market paused for a heartbeat, the words sharp and unsettling, before laughter returned, covering the sting. Again, phones recorded, saving the moment. By midday, Cato tried to rest under the shade of a tree, but soon Juma, the farmer, arrived with his dogs. "Out of my sight, beggar. My dogs eat better than you. If you sit here, they will think you are food." He snapped his fingers, and the dogs barked fiercely, rushing toward Cato. Cato flinched, but did not move, standing quietly. Moyo flapped furiously and shouted, "The man who threatens the weak is weaker than his dogs." Juma laughed, though his face flushed with irritation. "Even the parrot mocks me now? Foolish beggar, foolish bird." But others clapped and whistled, delighted at the strange scene. Later, in the marketplace, another humiliation struck. A group of young women pointed at Cato's torn shirt. "Look at his clothes," one sneered. "I would not use that cloth even to scrub my floor." Another joined in. "Perhaps his parrot can sew better than he can dress." They all laughed, recording themselves mocking him. Cato lowered his gaze. But Moyo called out, Clothes cover the body, but kindness covers the soul. Who is truly naked? Their laughter faltered, but pride forced them to laugh again, louder this time, to cover their discomfort. That afternoon, Cato approached the communal well, desperate for water. As he bent to fill a small cup, Baba Kibu, an elder, struck his hand away. Not for you. This well belongs to those who work for the village, not to beggars who do nothing. The crowd cheered the elder's words, seeing them as wisdom. Cato's lips trembled with thirst, but he did not argue. Moyo, however, squawked angrily, "A well that denies water denies life. And a man who denies life is poorer than death." Gasps spread among the villagers, followed by uneasy laughter. Again, someone filmed the incident, eager to post the sharp-tongued parrot online. When evening came, Cato sought shelter from the coming rain. He knocked gently on Baba Musa's hut. "Please, sir, may I rest inside just for tonight? The rain is heavy." Baba Musa laughed bitterly. "Inside my hut? Never. You may sleep with the goats outside. Perhaps they will keep you warmer than I would." Laughter rose from those nearby, and one man recorded Baba Musa's harsh refusal. Moyo ruffled his feathers and snapped, "Goats are kinder than men who slam doors." The villagers howled with laughter, yet some shifted uneasily, the truth striking deep even in their mirth. The humiliations did not stop. A group of young men drinking palm wine in the evening saw Cato walking by and decided to play a cruel trick. "Beggar," one shouted, "sing for us. Sing a song of your empty stomach." Another shoved him lightly, laughing. Cato shook his head. "I will not sing for mockery." But the men surrounded him, chanting, "Sing, beggar, sing." Before they could push harder, Moyo screeched, "Men who drink away kindness are drunk on cruelty." The crowd laughed again, phones recording, while Cato walked away silently. On another day, in the marketplace, a mischievous boy threw mud at Cato's back. The mud splattered across his already torn shirt, and everyone erupted in laughter. Cato stood still, his face tight with shame. The boy shouted, "Now you are decorated, beggar!" But Moyo screeched loudly, "A child who throws mud throws away his future." The boy froze, his face pale. Others laughed, but less convincingly, for the bird's words carried weight heavier than laughter. One of the cruelest incidents came during a village gathering. The people were seated to discuss harvest matters, and Cato quietly sat at the edge, listening. Chief Kamau noticed him and raised his voice. "Out! A beggar has no place among men who speak of the future." The villagers jeered and clapped at their chief's authority. Cato stood slowly, his head bowed, but Moyo shouted, "A chief without mercy is poorer than a beggar without food." The words cut deep, and though the people laughed to show loyalty to their leader, their eyes betrayed discomfort. Again, a phone caught every second. Still more cruelty came. One evening, thieves crept close and stole the only cloth Cato used as a blanket. In the morning, villagers laughed to see him half naked in the cold. "Look, the beggar cannot even keep his blanket," someone shouted. Cato shivered in silence. Moyo cried angrily, "The thief who steals from the poor steals his own honor." The laughter continued, but the words spread quickly online, quoted as if they were proverbs. Another humiliation followed soon. As Cato walked past the marketplace, a woman carrying vegetables spat near his feet. "Beggar, your shadow spoils my produce," she said cruelly. The people laughed loudly, enjoying her boldness. Moyo flapped and shouted, "A woman who spits on the poor spits on her own dignity." Phones caught the moment, and within hours, the video spread again. Day after day, humiliation piled upon humiliation. Children mocked, men insulted, women cursed. Each time, Cato endured in silence, his heart heavy but unbroken. Each time, Moyo's sharp words rang out, exposing cruelty and planting unease. And each time, villagers laughed, recorded, and shared, unaware that their laughter was building the very bridge that would carry Cato out of poverty. Across towns and cities, the videos multiplied. People laughed at the strange sight of a beggar with a talking parrot. But many listened closely to the bird's words. Clothes cover the body, kindness covers the soul. A chief without mercy is poorer than a beggar without food. A well that denies water denies life. The phrases spread like wildfire, repeated in classrooms, in workplaces, in homes. Memes were created, slogans printed, and hashtags multiplied. What the villagers meant for mockery turned into wisdom for the world. And Cato, sitting beneath the stars each night with Moyo beside him, began to sense that something was changing. He whispered, "They humiliate us, my friend, yet their laughter feels different now. It travels beyond this village." "Do you think this is the beginning?" Moyo blinked, his eyes shining in the moonlight, and answered softly, "Yes, Cato. They record to shame you, but the world watches with new eyes. One day their cruelty will make you famous. One day their laughter will crown you a billionaire." Cato sighed deeply, closing his eyes. "Then let me endure. Let me suffer each insult, each cruelty, each humiliation. For if the path to greatness is paved with mockery, I will walk it until my feet bleed. And when I return, I will not return with anger, but with gifts." And so the humiliations continued, one after another, each sharper than the last, each captured on phones, each carried beyond the dusty roads of Ndalama. The villagers believed they were crushing a beggar, but in truth, they were building a legend. The rains came earlier than expected that season, sudden sheets of water beating against the tin roofs of Ndalama village, turning the dust of the paths into thick mud. Cato had nothing to shield himself with. No blanket, no roof, not even a rag large enough to cover his shoulders. He crouched beneath the branch of a mango tree, shivering as the water soaked his clothes. Beside him, Moyo huddled close, feathers pressed tight to his body. Through the heavy rain, Cato could hear laughter. A group of boys spotted him trembling under the tree. "Look at the beggar," one shouted, his voice carrying even above the rain. "Even the goats have better shelter than him." They pointed, mocking his soaked body, and one boy picked up a clump of wet mud and hurled it. It struck Cato's arm, sliding down his skin with the rain. Moyo screeched angrily, "Children who mock a man in the rain will drown in their own cruelty." The boys howled in laughter, repeating the line as though it were a song. One raised his phone, shielding it under his shirt to film. "This will be gold," he said, and they hurried off, leaving Cato cold and humiliated. When the rain eased, Cato rose slowly, clothes clinging to his thin frame. He walked through the muddy path toward the marketplace, hoping for some food. He had not eaten since the crust of stale bread the day before. At the edge of the market, he approached a group of women sorting vegetables. "Please," he said softly, "may I have what you will not sell? Just scraps." One woman smirked, holding up a bruised tomato. "You want this? Catch it." She tossed it into the dirt at his feet. Another followed, throwing a half-rotten onion. Soon the group hurled spoiled vegetables at him, laughing as he tried to gather them with dignity. Phones recorded once more. Moyo flapped his wings and shouted, "Spoiled food reveals spoiled hearts. Generosity is wealth. Cruelty is poverty." For a moment the laughter faltered, but then pride drove it louder. "The bird thinks it is a preacher," one woman mocked, "but it belongs to a fool." By afternoon, Cato's hunger still gnawed. He wandered near the schoolyard where children played. Seeing him, they began a cruel game. "Beggar, tell us a story," one demanded. "If it is good, we will give you water." Cato's lips trembled. "I have no story, only a wish for kindness." The children burst out laughing. One mimicked his voice, another copied his walk with exaggerated limp steps. Moyo shouted above them, "Children who learn cruelty grow into men without honor." The words stung, but the children clapped as if it were part of a show. A teacher appeared, and instead of stopping them, he joined the mockery. "Study well, children, or you will end like him, poor and hopeless." The lesson was filmed, spread as a joke, but many who saw it online wept at the cruelty. As the day closed, Cato sought refuge at Baba Musa's hut once more. He knocked, rain still dripping from his hair. "Please, let me sit inside, only until the ground is dry." Baba Musa opened the door a crack, his eyes sharp. "I told you before, stay with the goats." He slammed the door again. From inside came laughter. "Even the goats will complain if he stays near them." Moyo's voice was low but cutting. "Doors that close to the needy open to shame." The words carried into the hut, silencing laughter for a moment. But outside, Cato sank onto the wet earth, tears mixing with the rain. The next morning he awoke weak, stomach hollow, body shaking. He walked to the marketplace, hoping for mercy. Instead, a group of drunk young men spotted him. "Beggar," one shouted, "today you will entertain us." They circled him, shoving his shoulders, forcing him to stumble. One struck his back with a stick, laughing. "Dance, beggar, dance." Cato raised his hands weakly. "Please, I mean no harm." But they pushed harder, the blows growing rougher. The crowd that gathered did not stop them. Instead, they cheered, phones raised high. Moyo screamed furiously, "Men who beat the hungry beat their own honor." His wings flapped wildly, striking one man's face. The crowd erupted in louder laughter, but inside, something broke in Cato. He fell to his knees, covering his face with his hands. "Why, Moyo?" he whispered. "Why must I live to be their sport?" When the men tired of their cruelty, they left him in the dirt. Some still recorded as he struggled to rise. Later that night, thieves crept near where he slept and stole the last cloth he had used as a blanket. By morning, villagers laughed to see him half naked in the cold dawn. "Look, even his rag rejected him," Moyo screeched. "The thief who steals from the poor steals from himself." But the laughter only grew. Soon after came the final humiliation. At a gathering of the whole village, Chief Kamau addressed the people about the harvest. Cato stood at the back, silent, simply wishing to listen. The chief's eyes fell on him, and his voice boomed, "Out! A beggar does not belong among men who speak of the future. Your presence is an insult to this council." The villagers roared in approval, chanting, "Out, out, beggar!" Cato bowed his head, shame burning his skin, and turned to leave. Moyo cried out, "A chief without mercy is poorer than a beggar without food." The words silenced the square for a breath. The chief's face twisted with anger, but pride forced the villagers to laugh again, covering their unease. Dozens of phones recorded the moment, uploading it within minutes. That night, Cato lay on the ground outside the village, body bruised, spirit crushed. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "I can't bear more, Moyo. I have endured hunger, cold, and shame. I have been spat on, beaten, stripped of dignity. What is left for me?" Moyo pressed close, his voice gentler than ever. "You are at the bottom, Cato, but even the bottom is a place to rise from. They believe they have broken you, but in truth, they have built you. Every insult, every blow, every cruel laugh has been carried beyond these walls. The world has seen, And one day, the world will raise you higher than you can imagine. Cato sobbed quietly. A billionaire? A man of honor? Can such things grow from such humiliation? Yes, Moyo answered, because humiliation is a seed, and when the seed falls into the soil of patience, it grows into greatness. Cato closed his eyes, whispering, Then I will endure a little longer, but if tomorrow brings no mercy, we must leave this place. I will find a life elsewhere, and if the gods are kind, I will return one day not as their victim, but as their benefactor. Above them, the stars shone faintly through the clouds, and the night carried the sounds of laughter from the village. Yet among the stars and the silence, destiny had begun to shift. What the villagers thought was the end of a beggar was only the beginning of a legend. The morning came heavy with silence, the kind of silence that carries both exhaustion and decision. Cato rose from the cold earth where he had slept, his body stiff, his heart heavy. Moyo fluttered onto his shoulder and studied him with sharp eyes. The village was already alive with movement, women carrying water, men heading to the fields, children running with laughter. But every eye that landed on Cato carried the same mix of mockery and disdain. He had become part of their daily entertainment, a living joke they could use to measure their own importance. Today, Moyo, Cato whispered, his voice cracked from thirst, we walk away. The parrot tilted his head. Yes, Cato, you have endured long enough. Let their cruelty remain with them. Your path lies elsewhere. Cato began to walk slowly through the village, his thin frame moving past the familiar huts and faces. A group of young men spotted him and jeered. Leaving already, beggar? Did the goats chase you away? One woman shouted, Don't forget to take your parrot, preacher. Perhaps another village will pay for its sermons. Phones rose again, recording, capturing his departure as if it were the final punchline of a long joke. Cato did not respond. His silence was deeper than usual, his steps heavier but certain. He left behind the road that had brought him into humiliation and began the long path toward Kisimba, the bustling city he had only heard of in distant whispers. The journey was harsh. The sun scorched him by day. The cold bit him by night. His stomach ached with hunger. His lips cracked with thirst. Yet Moyo remained on his shoulder, speaking softly when Cato's strength wavered. Patience, Cato. Each step away from cruelty is a step closer to destiny. On the second day of walking, a trader passing by with a cart of goods stopped to stare. Where are you going, beggar? He asked, his tone neither cruel nor kind, merely curious. Cato answered simply, I am going to Kisimba to find a life. The trader chuckled. Kisimba is no place for beggars. It swallows men like you whole. But perhaps your bird will talk you into fortune. He flicked the reins and moved on, leaving dust in his wake. By the time Cato reached the city, his body was weak, but his heart still carried the ember of endurance. Kisimba was unlike the village. Its streets were crowded, its markets vast, its noise overwhelming. No one knew him here. No one cared who he was. Yet hunger followed him like a shadow, and rejection still found him. He approached stalls, asking softly if they needed help carrying loads, but most brushed him aside. We have men already. Go beg elsewhere. He asked at a construction site, but the foreman waved him off. You are too thin. You would break before you carried a stone. Still, he persisted. Moyo stayed on his shoulder, drawing curious stares. Some laughed at the bird, others admired it. One man threw a coin at Cato's feet. Make the parrot speak, beggar. I'll give more if it sings. Cato did not bend to pick the coin. He whispered, No tricks, Moyo. We are not here to perform. We are here to survive. But Moyo looked at the man and said clearly, "A man who throws coins at another throws away his respect." The small crowd nearby gasped, then burst into laughter. Someone recorded it, shaking their phone with excitement. "This will make people laugh," he said. "A beggar and his parrot, wiser than the rich." Days passed, and Cato found work carrying baskets in the market for pennies. He hauled goods on his back, his body screaming with pain, but he never complained. At night, he ate scraps, often giving a piece to Moyo before taking a bite himself. The bird protested, "You are hungrier, Cato," but he shook his head. "We endure together." One evening, after a long day, Cato collapsed near the marketplace. A wealthy merchant named Oba noticed him. Oba was not like the others. He had sharp eyes that saw beyond rags. He watched as Moyo fluttered anxiously, pecking at Cato's shirt, squawking, "Rise, Cato, rise. Tomorrow waits for no man." Oba stepped closer. "Does your parrot truly speak? Or is this a trick?" Cato opened his eyes weakly. "He speaks truth, sir. More truth than men care to hear." Oba studied him. "You work in the market?" "Yes. I carry what they give me. And yet you do not beg?" "I have begged before," Cato admitted softly, "but mercy is rarer than gold. So now I work, though the work is small." Oba nodded slowly. "There is discipline in you. And something about this bird. It unsettles and yet inspires." He reached into his pocket, dropped a coin larger than any Cato had seen. "Eat well tonight. Tomorrow, come to my warehouse. I have heavier loads, but also heavier pay." Cato bowed his head. "Thank you, sir. You will not regret it." That night, as Cato shared a meal with Moyo, he whispered, "Perhaps this is the beginning. Perhaps leaving the village was the first step toward a different path." Moyo nuzzled his cheek and said, "Yes, Cato. The world begins to notice. They record your shame, but soon they will record your rise. From beggar to worker, from worker to man of fortune. One day, you will be a billionaire, and the same laughter that mocked you will echo with praise." Cato closed his eyes, his body finally full with food, his heart holding on to hope. The road ahead was long, but for the first time since leaving the village, he felt it was a road leading upward. And so, with nothing but endurance in his bones and a parrot of wisdom on his shoulder, Cato stepped into a future that would transform his life forever. Turning point. The next morning, Cato rose with purpose. His body was still sore from the days of hunger and humiliation, but his mind carried a new flame. He made his way through the crowded streets of Kasimba to the warehouse of Oba, the wealthy merchant who had noticed him. The building loomed large, filled with crates of spices, grains, and fabrics that would travel far across the region. Workers shouted and moved with hurried steps, yet among them Cato stood quietly, waiting. Oba spotted him and called out, "You came back, beggar. Good. Let us see if you can handle the weight of honest work." He pointed toward a stack of sacks filled with maize. "Carry those from here to the storeroom. If you fall, you are done. If you endure, you will have your pay." Cato bent to lift the first sack. It was heavier than anything he had carried before, but he gritted his teeth and rose to his feet. Step by step, he walked the distance, sweat pouring down his face. Other workers sneered, whispering, "He will break before noon. Look at his thin arms." But he did not break. By the time the sun reached its peak, Cato had carried more sacks than many of the others. Oba watched carefully, his eyes narrowing with interest. When the day ended, he approached Cato. "You are stronger than you look, and more determined than most. Come again tomorrow. The work will be harder, but so will the reward." He handed him a handful of coins, Enough for a decent meal. Cato bowed low. I thank you, sir. You have given me dignity. Moyo squawked proudly. Work is wealth. Patience is gold. The nearby workers laughed, some shaking their heads, but Oba smiled faintly. That bird of yours speaks like a philosopher. Perhaps he is worth more than your arms. Word began to spread through the city about the beggar with the talking parrot. Market-goers who had once mocked him now paused to listen when Moyo spoke. Mercy is strength. Cruelty is weakness, he would shout, and people would nod as if hearing wisdom from an elder. Small crowds began to gather, recording the parrot's speeches on their phones. The clips traveled faster than Cato realized, reaching other cities, then other countries. Online, people laughed at first, but slowly admiration grew. This beggar and his parrot speak truth, someone posted. Their wisdom is greater than our leaders. As Cato worked day after day in Oba's warehouse, his endurance and discipline earned him trust. Oba began giving him more responsibility. Cato, keep the accounts of these deliveries, he said one evening. I will teach you numbers, and you will learn to trade, not only to carry. Cato listened carefully, absorbing every word. By lantern light, he learned to read figures, to measure weights, to write records. Moyo often perched nearby, mimicking Oba's instructions with uncanny accuracy, drilling the lessons into Cato's mind. Soon he was not only a laborer, but an assistant, helping organize shipments and manage workers. But not all were pleased. Some jealous men grumbled, how does a beggar rise above us? Because of a talking bird? It is madness. They mocked Cato still, but their words carried less power now, for Oba defended him. This man works harder than any of you. Respect is earned by sweat, not by birth. One afternoon, as Cato carried a ledger across the market, a wealthy trader from another city overheard Moyo speaking. Fairness is profit, greed is loss, the bird declared. The trader laughed in amazement. Your bird speaks better business than most men. He approached Cato. Tell me, are you the beggar from the videos, the one the world talks about? Cato hesitated. Yes, I was the beggar mocked in Dalama. But I am not only that. The trader studied him closely. The world laughs at you, but they also admire you. They call you the beggar philosopher. If you are wise enough to endure humiliation with dignity, perhaps you are wise enough to succeed in trade. Come with me tomorrow to my caravan. I will test you. That night, Cato spoke with Moyo beneath the stars of Kisimba. Do you hear, my friend? Opportunity knocks, yet I fear I am not ready. Moyo replied softly. You were ready the day you chose patience over anger. You were ready the day you ate bread from the dust without cursing. Wealth is not only gold, it is the heart to endure. And you, Cato, have that heart. The next day, Cato joined the trader's caravan. He learned the roots, the costs of spices, the art of negotiation. Though his clothes were still ragged, his mind grew rich with knowledge. Each deal taught him a new lesson, each loss a sharper wisdom. Slowly, the trader entrusted him with small investments. Here, take these goods. Sell them in the market. Keep half the profit for yourself. Cato did as instructed, walking miles, speaking humbly but firmly, guided often by Moyo's interruptions. When a man tried to cheat him, Moyo shouted, Greed rots the hand that feeds it. The crowd laughed, but the cheater stepped back, embarrassed. Soon Cato returned with profit, greater than expected. The trader smiled. You are more than a laborer. You are a man of vision. Continue, and you will not only feed yourself but many others. As months passed, Cato's coins multiplied. From pennies, he gathered stacks. From stacks, he bought small goods of his own, trading them independently. Each time he earned, he saved, never wasting, always remembering the hunger of his days in Dalama. The villagers' laughter still echoed in his memory, but now it fueled his drive. Videos of him and Moyo spread further, reaching television screens and news articles. Headlines called him the beggar with the bird of wisdom. Interviews followed, where he spoke not of anger but of patience, not of revenge but of endurance. "The world mocked me," he said softly, "but mockery is not the end. It can be the beginning, if you choose dignity over despair." Investors began to notice. One day, Oba himself said, "Kato, your story has value. People trust a man who rose from dust. Use that trust. Start your own venture, I will back you." He handed Kato his first large investment. Kato bowed deeply. "You give me more than money. You give me belief. I will not waste it." With that seed, Kato began his first business, trading maize and grains with honesty and fairness. His reputation spread quickly. Customers said, "He is different. He is a man who knows hunger, so he never cheats." Profits grew, and soon he expanded into fabrics, then into transport. Each step was guided by lessons of endurance, each success built on the foundation of humiliation he had endured. Through it all, Moyo remained by his side, speaking boldly in meetings, astonishing guests with his uncanny wisdom. "Fairness brings fortune, cruelty brings ruin," he would declare, and men who had mocked at first soon nodded in respect. Years later, Kato stood in a tall office overlooking the city. His clothes were fine, his businesses vast. He was no longer a man carrying sacks in the dust. He was a man counted among millionaires, on the path to billionaire wealth. Yet he never forgot where he began, never forgot the laughter of Ndalama, never forgot the night he had cried in the rain. He turned to Moyo, perched on the window. "We have come far, my friend, from a beggar mocked by children to a man respected across nations. But this is not the end. We will go further still. We will be billionaires. And when we are, we will return to Ndalama, not with anger, but with gifts." Moyo tilted his head, eyes gleaming. "Yes, Kato, because the greatest wealth is not money, but the power to forgive. And one day, they will see that the beggar they mocked has become their greatest benefactor." And so the turning point was sealed. Kato was no longer a man crawling beneath humiliation. He was a man climbing toward greatness, his steps steady, his heart unyielding, his destiny unfolding with every sunrise. The years that followed moved like the turning of seasons, each one carrying Kato further from the days when he was mocked as nothing more than a beggar. The city of Kisimba had come to know him first as a humble worker, then as a clever trader, and finally as a man whose story was too unusual to be ignored. Videos of him and Moyo still traveled across the world, clips of a thin man with worn clothes and a parrot speaking sharp truths. But now those clips were not only about humiliation, they had become the origin story of a man who was rising higher with every step. One morning, as Kato prepared for a business meeting, he stood by the mirror of his modest but clean home. He adjusted the simple jacket he wore, still not one of luxury but respectable enough for his growing reputation. Moyo fluttered onto his shoulder, staring into the mirror as well. "The world sees a beggar still, Kato," the parrot said, "but soon they will see the billionaire you are becoming." Kato smiled faintly. "If I become a billionaire, Moyo, it will not be because I chased gold. It will be because I never forgot hunger. That hunger keeps me honest. That hunger keeps me moving." The meeting that day was with investors from the capital city. They had followed his story for months, impressed by his honesty in trade. As they sat across from him in a tall glass building, one of them asked, "Mr. Kato, tell us, how did you begin? How did a man with nothing become a man we now consider worthy of millions?" Cato leaned forward, his voice calm but steady. I began in dust. I began with laughter hurled at me like stones. I began with doors slammed in my face, with food thrown into dirt, with rain soaking me while children mocked. I endured because I had no choice but patience, and I endured with the voice of truth beside me. He gestured to Moyo, who perched proudly. The parrot tilted his head and said, "Patience is the seed. Fortune is the fruit." The investors chuckled, surprised, but also charmed. One nodded. This story will sell itself. A beggar with a parrot who becomes a millionaire. The people will love it. And so it began. With their backing, Cato expanded his trade far beyond Kisimba. Trucks carried his grains across borders, fabrics reached foreign markets, and soon his name appeared on contracts and business journals. But more than the goods he sold, it was his story that spread like fire. News anchors repeated the tale. From beggar to billionaire, Cato's journey is one of endurance, humility, and inspiration. Interviews followed, where he sat before cameras, his voice still quiet, but his words carrying weight. I was mocked as a beggar, he told one reporter, but every insult became a lesson. Every humiliation became a brick in the foundation of my rise. I tell young people, do not fear laughter, fear giving up. Moyo interrupted proudly, laughter fades, but dignity endures. The clip went viral overnight, quoted in schools, printed on posters, turned into memes that spread even to countries Cato had never heard of. As his fortune grew, so did his influence. He bought warehouses, built factories, and employed hundreds. Men who had once looked at him with pity now came to him for jobs. Women who had mocked him in markets now sold goods through his businesses. Every step reminded him of Ndalama, of the faces that had scorned him, and he kept whispering to himself, "Not yet. When the time is right, I will return." One evening, he was invited to speak at a university in the capital. The hall was filled with students eager to hear the man whose story had become a legend. As he walked to the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. Cato paused, overwhelmed. He remembered the days when applause had been replaced by jeers, when his only audience had been mocking children. He took a deep breath and began, "I stand before you, not as a man born into riches, but as a man born into ridicule. I was the beggar you laughed at on your phones. But I tell you today, the beggar you mock can be the billionaire you follow tomorrow. Do not despise the lowly, for the lowly may rise higher than you can dream." Moyo flapped his wings and added, "Mockery is the soil. Greatness is the harvest." The hall erupted with laughter, but it was not cruel laughter. It was joy, admiration, belief. After the speech, journalists swarmed him. One asked, "Cato, what is the secret of your success? How did you transform from a man with nothing to one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in Africa?" He smiled gently. "The secret is not mine alone. It is patience. It is honesty. And it is the wisdom of a bird who spoke truth when no one else would." The journalist turned the microphone toward Moyo, who squawked, "Truth feeds wealth. Lies feed hunger." The clip aired on television that night, replayed countless times, shared online until millions had seen it. Cato's businesses continued to grow, moving into technology, education, and agriculture. Each venture was marked by the same principle: fairness. He refused to cheat customers, refused to underpay workers, and because of that, people trusted him. Trust became his greatest currency, and with trust came wealth greater than he had imagined. Within a decade, Cato's name appeared on the lists of the richest men in Africa. Headlines declared, "From beggar to billionaire, the man who redefined success." Crowds gathered to hear him speak. Children carried posters with his quotes, and even leaders sought his counsel. Yet through all the fame and fortune, Cato never grew arrogant. He still lived simply, still remembered the hunger of the past, still whispered at night to Moyo, "We are nothing without patience." One night, as they stood on the balcony of his grand office tower overlooking the lights of Kisimba, Moyo spoke softly. "You are a billionaire now, Kato. The world knows your name. But one thing remains unfinished." Kato nodded slowly. "Yes, Ndalama, the village that mocked me, the place that carved patience into my bones. It is time to return, not with anger, but with kindness, not with curses, but with gifts." Moyo's eyes gleamed. "Then let us return. Let them see what their beggar has become." And so, with fame at its height, with fortune vast and influence wide, Cato prepared to go back to the very place where his journey began. He was no longer the man who walked into the village with torn clothes and empty hands. He was the man the world called the billionaire with a beggar's past, and he was ready to show his people that greatness is not found in laughter at the weak, but in kindness from the strong. The day finally came when Cato's cars rolled down the same dusty road that had once carried his broken sandals and weary body into Ndalama. But this time, it was not the tired steps of a beggar that stirred the dust. It was a convoy of shining black vehicles, their engines low and powerful, carrying with them the wealth of a man the world now called a billionaire. The sun glimmered on their windows, and villagers rushed from their huts, shielding their eyes from the sight. "Who comes to Ndalama with such power?" one woman gasped. "Is it a minister? A foreign king?" But as the doors opened and Cato stepped out, silence fell over the crowd. Gone was the ragged shirt, the cracked feet, the hollow cheeks. Before them stood a man dressed in a fine yet simple African suit, his posture tall, his face strong, his presence commanding. On his shoulder perched Moyo, feathers as bright as ever, eyes scanning the villagers with knowing sharpness. Gasps spread like fire. "It is him," someone whispered. "The beggar." Another muttered, "No, no, it cannot be. This man is not the one we mocked." But he was. The beggar they had laughed at, spat on, beaten, driven into the rain. He had returned not in shame, but in triumph. Chief Kamau himself came forward, his voice trembling though he tried to mask it with authority. "Cato, is it truly you?" Cato's eyes rested on him calmly. "Yes, Chief. It is I, the beggar who once stood at the edge of your meetings, the beggar you drove away. The man you told had no place among those who spoke of the future." The chief lowered his gaze, words caught in his throat. Around them, the villagers murmured, shame rising in their hearts like a tide. Then Moyo's voice rang out clear and sharp. "Mockery is short. Mercy is long. You mock the beggar, yet he returns as your billionaire." The villagers gasped, some covering their mouths, others hanging their heads. Children who once sang cruel songs now clung to their mothers' skirts, staring wide-eyed. Men who had beaten him shifted uncomfortably, their pride cracking under the weight of guilt. Women who had spat at his feet now felt their throats tighten with regret. Cato raised his hand gently. "Do not be afraid. I have not returned for revenge. I have not returned to mock as I was mocked. I have returned for something greater." The people leaned in, their curiosity battling their shame. "I remember every insult," Cato continued, his voice steady. "I remember every stone of laughter, every door slammed, every drop of rain that soaked me while you jeered. And I also remember the silence in my heart that said, 'Endure, Cato, endure, and one day you will rise.' Today, that day has come. I am a billionaire. I am known across nations. Yet wealth without mercy is nothing. So I have returned not to curse you, but to lift you." The crowd erupted into whispers, disbelief mixing with awe. Cato pointed toward the open land beyond the market. There, I will build a school, greater than any this village has seen. Your children will learn to read, to write, and to dream. No child of Ndalama will be mocked for ignorance again. A cheer broke out among the younger villagers, while mothers wept openly, their tears running down cheeks that had once sneered. Cato turned toward the men. And for you, the men of this village, I will bring work. A factory will rise here, and those who once mocked me as weak will find strength in their labor. You will not wander for wages. They will be here, in your own home. The men bowed their heads, some wiping away tears they tried to hide. Finally, Cato looked at the women, many of whom remembered turning him from the well, refusing him water. His voice grew gentle. And for you, the women of Ndalama, who have walked miles with heavy pots, who have suffered because there was no well deep enough, no system strong enough, I will bring water to your homes, clean water, running water, so your daughters will not spend their youth fetching what should be at their doorstep. Cries rose from the women, loud and unashamed, their hands lifted in gratitude. Children clapped without understanding, sensing only joy. The shame of years melted into tears, and the sound of weeping filled the square. Moyo flapped his wings and declared, "The beggar you mocked builds your future. The poor you despised becomes the billionaire who gives." The words struck deep, and this time there was no laughter to cover the sting, only silence, broken by sobs, filled with the weight of redemption. Chief Kamau stepped forward, his voice cracking. "Cato, we wronged you. We mocked you, humiliated you, and yet you return with kindness. Why?" Cato looked at him with eyes that carried both pain and peace. Because anger builds nothing. Because revenge feeds only pride. But kindness builds schools, and forgiveness brings water. I return not as a beggar, not even as a billionaire, but as your brother who has seen the world and chosen mercy. The chief fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Others followed, bowing before the man they had once despised. But Cato shook his head. "Rise. Do not kneel before me. Kneel only before your conscience. Stand with me instead, as we build a future together." And so the village began to change that very day. Land was cleared for the school, workers hired for the factory, engineers brought to dig wells and lay pipes. Each project carried Cato's mark of fairness. No corruption, no greed, only honesty. The same honesty that had lifted him from dust now poured into the soil of his people. Children ran freely through the new classrooms, their laughter filled with learning, not mockery. Men found pride in their labor, returning home with wages that fed their families. Women filled their pots with clean water at their doorsteps, no longer walking miles beneath the sun. Everywhere in the village, the name of Cato was spoken with reverence, and whenever someone asked how he endured the cruelty, he would smile softly and say, "Because I had Moyo, a bird who spoke truth when the world refused to listen." Moyo would flap his wings proudly and cry, "Mercy is wealth, kindness is gold, forgiveness is billionaire treasure." And this time, the villagers laughed not with cruelty, but with joy. The weeks that followed Cato's return reshaped Ndalama in ways no one could have imagined. Where once there had been dusty paths and children mocking in the marketplace, there now stood the frame of a new school, its walls rising day by day under the hands of workers hired by Cato. The clang of hammers, the shouts of builders, the hum of progress filled the air where silence and cruelty once reigned. But it was not the sound of construction alone that changed the village. It was the heavy silence of conscience that pressed on every man and woman who had ever laughed at him. Each nail hammered into the school's beams struck their hearts as a reminder of the words they had shouted in the past. One morning, Mama Thandi, who had once pointed at him by the roadside and called him useless, came trembling to where Cato stood overseeing the work. Her old hand shook as she held out a basket of roasted maize. "My son," she said, her voice breaking, "I mocked you when you were hungry. I laughed while you trembled, and yet you returned to feed our children. Forgive me. Please forgive me." Cato looked at her gently. He took the basket and gave it to the workers beside him. Then he placed his hand on her shoulder. "Mama Thandi, your words wounded me once, but wounds can heal if love replaces them. You are forgiven." Tears streamed down her face as she fell to her knees, but Cato helped her rise. "No, Mama. We kneel only to God. Stand with me instead and help build what will last." The same day, Juma the farmer, who had once unleashed dogs on him, stood before Cato with lowered eyes. "I called you food for my dogs," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "And now you are the man who gives food to my family. I have no words for the weight of my sin." Moyo perched proudly on Cato's shoulder and squawked, "Dogs of cruelty become beggars of mercy." The crowd listening gasped, but instead of laughter, only nods and tears followed. Cato nodded slowly. "Juma, you wronged me, but today you admit it. That is the first step toward redemption. Work with me now, and let your strength build instead of destroy." Juma wept openly, bowing his head, then took his place among the workers, lifting bricks with new purpose. The apologies did not stop. One by one, villagers came, their pride broken, their voices trembling. The women who had thrown spoiled vegetables cried as they saw their children holding books Cato had provided. Baba Musa, who had slammed his door, could not meet Cato's eyes when he watched the water flow from new pipes into his wife's pot. "I closed my door to you," he whispered, "and you opened the door of life to us. How can such a thing be repaid?" Cato answered softly, "By never closing your door again to one in need." The school opened with a song sung by children whose voices once mocked but now praised. They recited verses of wisdom taught by teachers paid with Cato's generosity. "The beggar who endures may rise higher than kings," the children sang, their voices bright in the morning air. Parents wept openly, remembering the cruel songs their children had once chanted to shame him. Men who had beaten him now worked proudly in the factory he built, their hands producing goods that traveled far and brought income to the village. Each wage they carried home was a reminder of their guilt, but also of Cato's forgiveness. At night, they sat with their families and whispered, "We once struck him. Now we eat because of him. How will history remember us, if not as cruel?" Their wives answered, "History will remember that he forgave and that we learned." The women who once denied him water stood at the new well, watching clean water pour into their pots. They washed their faces with it, but no water could wash away the memory of the day they told him his shadow would curse their supply. In shame they cried, "We said your thirst was a curse, yet you quenched ours forever. We spat on you, yet you gave us dignity." "Forgive us," Cato answered, his voice steady but kind. "I forgive you, because if I held on to bitterness, we would all remain thirsty." One day, Chief Kamau gathered the people himself in the square. His proud shoulders were bent, his eyes red. He raised his hands to still the crowd. "People of Ndalama," he said, "I was the greatest sinner among you. I cast him out of our council. I called him unworthy of the future. Yet today, the future is built by his hands, not mine. I stand before you not as chief, but as a man ashamed." He turned to Cato. "Forgive me, Cato. Forgive the leader who could not see your worth. Moyo's voice rang out sharp and true. A chief without mercy is poorer than a beggar without bread. The words, once spoken years ago in humiliation, now struck the village like a bell of truth. Cato stepped forward and lifted the chief's bowed head. I forgive you, Kamau, but remember this: leadership without kindness is emptiness. Let us lead together now, for the sake of Ndalama's children. The crowd erupted in tears and applause, not laughter. The shame of years weighed on their hearts, but with it came release. They had been cruel, but cruelty had not been their end. Forgiveness had given them another chance. Weeks turned into months, and the village transformed. Where once people had been divided by scorn, now they were united in gratitude. The marketplace no longer rang with mocking songs, but with honest trade. The schoolyard no longer echoed with cruel laughter, but with the recitation of lessons. The well no longer denied the thirsty, but poured freely for all. And at the center of it all stood Cato, no longer the beggar they despised, but the benefactor they loved. Children gathered around him, calling him Uncle Cato. Women blessed him each morning. Men shook his hand with pride instead of disdain. Yet Cato never let their praise make him arrogant. He still spoke softly, still ate simply, still whispered to Moyo at night. One evening, as the sun set and the school bell rang, the villagers gathered to honor him. They presented him with a carved wooden statue of a parrot, wings spread wide. This, they said, is to remind us forever of the voice that spoke truth when our hearts were blind. Cato held it in his hands, tears in his eyes. Moyo was my voice when I had none. He carried truth into your ears when my silence could not. Honor him, and you honor the mercy that saved us all. Moyo squawked proudly. Kindness is the true billionaire's treasure. The crowd cheered, not with ridicule, but with joy. And so the legacy of Cato and Moyo became the legacy of Ndalama itself. The village that had once been infamous for its cruelty became known for its transformation. Travelers who came to see the school and the factory heard the story from the villagers themselves, who now confessed openly, we mocked him, we humiliated him, but he forgave us, and because of that, we live better than we ever dreamed. The shame of the past remained, but it was no longer a wound. It was a scar that told a story of cruelty, of endurance, of forgiveness, of redemption. And at the heart of it, the moral that spread beyond the borders of Ndalama, across nations and generations. Never mock a beggar, for tomorrow he may return as a billionaire benefactor, carrying not vengeance, but kindness. They mocked him as a beggar. They humiliated him without mercy, but he returned as the billionaire who gave them hope, forgiveness, and a future. His story is a reminder that kindness is greater than cruelty and patience stronger than pain. Tell us in the comments what lesson touched your heart the most, and don't forget to subscribe to African Tales by Sanan for more emotional and suspenseful stories that will stay with you long after the tale is told.